Hello. Thank you for joining me for this Careers for the Common Good video training on community partnerships. My name is Tanner Banyan, Program Coordinator for Kansas Campus Compact. This video should take less than an hour of your time and is required for you to successfully complete all of the Careers for the Common Good requirements and receive your education award. You might be wondering why you've been asked to watch this training, and even rolling your eyes at one more additional requirement. But I believe you will find this video useful not only in your current service work, whether in education, healthcare, or nonprofits, but also in your career and future involvement in your community. Put simply, and this is probably not news to any of you, common good careers like teaching and nursing and social services have an enormous demand for skilled individuals. And the services those individuals provide are seeing increasing demand on their time and ability because of changes in the economy, changes in the age or ethnic demography of the community, or the nature of the services themselves. With these high demands, collaborating with other like-minded individuals and groups will be critical. Moreover, the scale and complexity of problems faced by our communities will require joint efforts in the future. This video training is designed to give you at least a small set of insights that will serve you well in your service and in your lifetime as you tackle those challenges. We've divided the presentation into 4 principal sections. The first 3 are based on the 3 benchmarks of community partnerships as developed by Campus Compact: designing the partnership, building collaborative relationships, and sustaining partnerships over time. Obviously, in a YouTube video format like this one, there is not a lot of room for questions and answers. However, I encourage you to talk about these topics with your peers and your campus coordinator. You may also email Kansas Campus Compact with questions. So let's dive right in. The first stage in the benchmarks for effective community partnerships is, not surprisingly, designing the partnership. It sounds simple enough, but if partnerships aren't designed well, all the rest of the things fall apart pretty quickly. At their core, effective partnerships are designed on principles of sharing and reciprocity. This means they have to be founded on a shared vision and clearly articulated values. And it means that every partner sees how the partnership benefits themselves as well as the common interests of the group. Over these next few slides, I'm going to unpack those pieces one by one. When I say partnerships are founded on a shared vision, what does that mean? It essentially aims at the answer to the question, what kind of community do you wish to create? Every strong partnership derives its power from an agreement on the answer to this question. Partners come together because they share a commitment to a specific place or issue, but they may not all immediately have an articulated vision for how that place or issue can be changed for the better. Take some time as a group to investigate each member's mental image of the future and use this to craft a vision statement for the partnership as a whole that will be a tool throughout your relationship. As you're doing this, you're going to want to explore many questions and, most importantly, get to know one another. But a few helpful questions might be: why is this change needed? How will the partnership affect this target group or issue positively or negatively? How will your work increase the capacity of the local community to overcome the obstacles you identify? I'm sure there are others, and they will most likely be specific to the group you are working with. But remember that this deliberate establishment of a shared vision is crucial. Don't just talk about it, write it down, and make sure everyone is on the same page. You'll be glad you did later. Part of finding that shared vision requires making sure all partners are clearly articulating their values and that the partnership itself has clearly articulated values. Sometimes partnering organizations will hold contrasting philosophies based on history or funding or just a generally different worldview. They may have completely different expectations about how work should be accomplished. They even may have different words to describe what they do. Usually, if everyone states these values clearly and upfront, everyone can be accommodated. It's very important that each partner feels they are an equal player. This will help ensure that they are active participants in all the conversations, tasks, and governance of the partnership. This will only happen if everyone believes in the vision of the partnership and they understand and feel comfortable with the language and methods used. The more this happens, the more sense of ownership each partner will have and the more commitment they will have, and thus the easier it will be to overcome challenges. Because different groups will come to this partnership with different perspectives, it's important to identify and acknowledge common interests. In other words, what's in this for all of us together? True partners see themselves and conduct themselves as members of a common community. This doesn't just come naturally, however. It takes cultivation. Early on, you need to determine how to share with each other. You'll need to discuss how to share resources so that everyone feels like they have what they need to get the job done. You'll need to share risk so no one organization feels like they're carrying that load alone. And you'll obviously want to share the rewards from success. Remember that there are three key elements of power: control over money, control over information, and control over people. So you'll want to be clear with one another how that control will be divided and shared. Despite all our happy talk about partnerships and common interest, never forget that partners are brought to the table by the promise of concrete, clear benefit to themselves. Without that, they're unlikely to show up, and even if they do, they won't be full participants. It's almost never helpful to have one dominant partner, like a college or the government, behave as if they are the ones doing the giving. Each partner will want to think about what their institution cares about and how the partnership's success will translate to their institution's ability to meet its own goals. Truly engaged partnerships are those in which benefits flow in all directions. After you've formed your partnership and clearly laid out the vision and values, what then? Stage 2 emphasizes building the collaborative relationships that lead directly to success. And make no mistake, the most important component of any collaborative activity will be the depth and strength of those relationships. When I say the word collaboration, what I mean is the type of work in which participants share ideas, responsibility, and credit in achieving their desired goal. Collaborators strike a balance between jointly planning and individually executing specific tasks. In short, collaborative relationships yield a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. These types of relationships are characterized by being based on trust and mutual respect, by being multidimensional, and by an organization that is organized and led well. As obvious as it sounds, it still bears reinforcing that trust and mutual respect are keystones for effective collaboration. An atmosphere of equal voice and shared responsibility feels unnatural and awkward to many people, and is outright contrary to the way many individuals work. For most of Americans, in fact, we tend to cherish the philosophy of independent action and decision-making, and sharing that power with partners takes adjustment. For instance, on a recent workshop on this very topic with a group of doctors, we solicited feedback. "What have you learned from this training?" we asked. One doctor replied, "I found out exactly what prevents me from getting anything done. It's the people. If everyone would leave me alone, maybe I'd accomplish something." However, for collaborative activities to succeed, exactly the opposite attitude is required. And building relationships based on trust and mutual respect can be very difficult given imbalances in power and resources that may be present. History can play a part. In the higher education world, there is often a long-standing feeling of distrust and frustration between members of the college and members of the community. Geography, sort of the breakdown of a community along regional lines, can inhibit this, as can of course race and ethnicity. Interestingly, these are often the very same things that will serve as assets because different perspectives help all of us see the connectedness of a challenge and how we can contribute. If trust and mutual respect is fostered early, when challenges arise later, they can be dealt with openly and in good faith. I also mentioned that effective partnerships need to be built to recognize the power of multidimensional relationships. Another way to say this is that diversity matters. Again, this is not particularly surprising, but also again, it's not particularly easy to do in practice. Partnerships often form because challenges are bigger and more complex than any one organization can address. So since those challenges are multi-layered, the collaboration needs to take place among multiple sectors. Include nonprofits and educational groups with religious entities and government officials. Do not neglect the role that for-profit companies can play as well. For instance, think for a moment about the challenges facing public education in Kansas. These challenges are deep-seated and connect to the needs for housing and nutrition for students, issues with drug and alcohol abuse, public safety, and economic development, just to name a few. To address these, partnerships need to involve organizations attending to each issue, but also throughout different sectors. The sectors approach is just as important because you will need to access the influence of decision makers, and they come from all walks and have different levers they can push to effect change. It turns out, multi-sector, multi-dimensional partnerships are hard work. People will come to the group from vastly different professional and personal cultures, with different values and habits, and different ways of relating to one another. Good collaborative relationships leverage these differences for success and work diligently to ensure these differences don't spark conflict. How do they do it? Go back to our earlier slides. If your partnership states its group values and vision clearly and upfront, then it's much easier to find common ground to work from. Use those statements and listen closely to how others see and do things, and be very intentional about sharing information and practices freely with one another. Another way to turn what looks like a risk with multidimensional partnerships into a strength is to view communities in terms of their assets rather than their needs. So ask your partners who has created a community asset map recently. If no one has done so, you have your first critical task in front of you. If a group has one, they are already actively engaged and the group can build upon their prior work. Community asset maps are comprehensive lists of all the resources that a given group can bring to bear on a particular challenge or set of challenges. Think broadly when creating one of these, and you'd be surprised by how many resources even the poorest community has at its fingertips. And remember that resources are not just financial assets. They include intellectual and manpower assets, cultural assets, and anything else you can think of. Here's one example of a community asset map done symbolically. As you can see, this map lists individual assets, community association assets, and institutional assets. The strength of this model is it is able to include non-physical assets. However, it does a poor job of showing the accessibility or locations of those assets and how easily they can be connected to the effort. On the other hand, a geographic asset map like this one does the opposite. It gives us physical locations but does not show intellectual assets very well. MapQuest and Google Maps are fantastic tools for visualizing where organizations and service sites are located. A final characteristic of successful collaborations is their organizational design. Good collaborations have clear roles for their leadership. As I've already touched on, they spread the resources, responsibilities, and rewards throughout the group, and they continue to identify and train new leadership to ensure sustainability. The final stage of successful partnerships that is important to focus on is the need to sustain that partnership over time. Organizations come and go, individuals come and go within those organizations, and attitudes and goals change over time. Effective partnerships manage to navigate those changes. They do so by developing a process for communications and decision-making during times of change, and by evaluating the methods and outcomes of their work on a regular basis. Partnerships will only flourish if the process for responding for change is a robust one, and since most challenges you will look to address will require long-term action, change within the partnership will most assuredly happen. I've spoken a lot about relationships already. Face-to-face communication cannot be replaced, especially in dealing with change. Those relationships depend on interpersonal interaction. This will offer opportunities for informal and formal sharing of information to address concerns, resolve conflicts, and plan for the future. Moreover, these face-to-face interactions offer time to revisit the essential elements of your partnership. Remember the vision and value statements we spoke of earlier? Circumstance may lead you to revise these as well. In fact, it's recommended that you periodically review those regardless of circumstances. For instance, you might ask, how does this partnership fit with our individual work? Does everyone in this partnership exercise a voice and participate actively? Do we use the same language? Are resources being shared equitably? Are roles defined clearly? Are there new organizations we should include? Is everyone benefiting? And finally, are we making progress on our goals? You should also allow for the unpredictable changes that will occur. Having a plan in place for when this happens is important. Finally, it's very important to evaluate your progress. Don't be afraid to use quantitative and qualitative measures to do so. And remember, you wanted to change something in your community, so be sure to measure your impact on that, rather than just outputs of the organization, like papers written or events held. I have laid out here 6 steps for evaluation that you should keep in mind. Number 1, tailor your assessment tool to the specific goals of your partnership. 2, this means you should have clear goals, of course, and a clear idea of what success might look like. Number 3, you might have indicators that are outposts focused on your day-to-day activities, but don't neglect the long-term indicators too. 4, understand whose role it is to define success. Partners may have different opinions on this matter. 5, collect the data. And number 6, don't forget to use the data you collect. That's the point here. If you succeeded, trumpet that success. If you have places to do better, figure out what can be done differently. With these steps in mind, you should have a preliminary understanding of what it takes to build an effective community partnership. I hope this is a useful tool for you in your service and throughout your professional and personal lives. Congratulations! You've completed the training video on partnerships. Now all you have to do is go to the following web link, print off the PDF there, sign it, and return it to your campus coordinator. Be sure to do this to fulfill this piece of your service term and ensure your eligibility to receive your education award. If you have any questions, please let us know or speak to your campus coordinator. Thank you again for being a part of the Careers for the Common Good program.